Mishkan. And Aaron felt bad. He didn't have a role. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, don't worry, your role is going to be greater because you get to be Meitiv and Madlik the Neiros. And you're aware of the problem. What do you mean? Thank you. Hadlaka itself is kosher bizarre. You don't have to be a Kohen to light the menorah. Doesn't have to be Aaron, doesn't have to be any of his kids. And the Ramban says that what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Aaron was that a time would come when his descendants would be part of a different Chanuakah Sabayis, a different dedication of the Beis of the Mishkan, of the Beis HaMikdash, at the time of Chanukah. And, the Kohanim, the Chashmonaim, led the revolution, threw out the oppressors, and were mechanech a new Beis HaMikdash. Okay? That's the Ramban. Ramban is not without its problems. Understand? Was this like a consolation prize? Was Aaron told, okay, listen, for some reason you're getting scripted out of the Chanuakah Mishkan. You don't have any role today. But don't worry, we're going to make it up to you. You're going to have something in the future terrific. If Aaron was getting a consolation prize, then the consolation prize could have been the Avodah. He's going to wind up doing the Avodah for eternity after the Mishkan is built. So, what kind of an answer and the pious and the consolation was it to Aaron that his descendants will have a role in Chanukah? What's the answer, folks? Somehow, this is not a consolation. It's not telling Aaron that whatever they're doing is only for the moment, but you're going to have a permanent role. That can't be it. Somehow, Chanukah has to relate to the menorah itself. And here, I assume most people in the room have heard what may be the two most important words about Chanukah in the Machshava and understanding Chanukah on a deeper level, the famous Or Hagonus. That the idea of Chanukah is that the light of Chanukah is a hamshacha, it's a continuation of not only the light of the menorah that Aaron is now going to light, but that it is a kind of light that is going to link the distant past with all of eternity. It will continue illuminating the way to Klal Yisrael way past the Churban of the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash. This Or Hagonus, the hidden light. This is what I'm going to talk about in the first part of the hour that I have until I get to a different topic entirely. This hidden light, where does it appear? We'll explain in a second how far back in time it goes. But where do we make reference to it every day? Time's up. Maybe your Nusach HaTfilah is a little different than ours, and I don't know. The first bracha of Birchas Kriyas Shema, the first bracha that you say after Baruch Hu of the two Birchas Kriyas Shema before Shema. What's the bracha about? It's about Or. HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates light every day. Theoretically, it's about HaKadosh Baruch Hu creating a new day. The sun rises again. We thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for light. There's one problem, one strong halachic problem. And if you've never thought of it, then you're like the rest of us who don't really concentrate properly in davening. What's the penultimate line? The line right before the chasima, before the end of the bracha. Baruch atah Hashem yotzer ha'ma'aretz. What's the line right before that?
You don't have it, but Or Chadash.
You don't have it?
No.
Okay, you're on the winning side. We have Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir. Now you're going to find out why you don't say it and why we do. Why don't we say it? Why don't you say it? What does that line mean? Or chadash al tzion te'eh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should cause a new light to shine upon Yerushalayim. What's the problem with that line? What does that line mean to most people? What do you think Ashkenazim think of that new light is?
We also say Orim Gedolim Kivram Chasto.
Yeah, that's okay. You don't have the same problem we have. I'll explain in a second.
Orim Gedolim also means present. Since it is also,
So they also.
Thank you. Amud, Orim Gedolim, so those is also Orim Gedolim.
Okay, so you say you'll steer clear of the problem. There's a problem. Rishonim mentioned it already. Putting in this line seems to be a halachic problem. Why? Because the simple reading of that line is Or Chadash al Tzion To'eh is talking about Mashiach. There'll be a bright new day. We just had it in the Parsha. Yaakov fights with Esav's Malach. When does the fight stop? In Las Vegas it goes 15 rounds. Somehow this wasn't Las Vegas. They kept on fighting until when? Until there was a new day. Okay. What does that day represent in the fight between Yaakov and Esav's Malach? It means at the end of time, at the time Mashiach comes. So on a Parshat level, this reference seems to be a backhanded reference to Mashiach. Small problem. There's a rule that whenever you make a long bracha, the penultimate line, the line right before the Chatimah, has to be Me'ein HaBracha. So the last thing that you want to do is have the line right before talking about Mashiach. You can stick that in the middle of the bracha, but not the line right before. And for that reason, I imagine there's some people that don't say it. There were Rishonim who were against it. The Rush says, no, it's no problem. Because it's not talking about Mashiach. It's talking about Or. It's talking about light. Which light? The Or Haganuz. The hidden light. Okay, I mentioned that 3 times already. What is this hidden light? So, to refresh the memory of some of you, maybe 1 or 2 people haven't heard it, according to Chazal, the first light that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created was so powerful, Rashi mentions in the Chumash, was so powerful that a person could see from one end of the world to the other end of the world. And that light was too good. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu took that light and sequestered it away, ganuz. He hid it away. It's still around, and it'll come back in the future. So it is sort of a reference to Mashiach, but it refers specifically to that Or. The Or Chadash means, for us it'll be a new light, but it'll be the return of the old light of the Or Haganuz. That Or Haganuz, if your mind is starting to race ahead, what did it mean? You could see it from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth. It wasn't Google Earth. It wasn't Google Earth. The idea of being able to see from one end of the world to the other end of the world meant that at the beginning there was some kind of ha'ora, some kind of illumination from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that allowed human beings to see the world with absolute clarity, to see things for what they were, to understand their mahus, to understand their content, their importance, their spiritual roots, what they're supposed to be used for, how they fit into the scheme of things. That was the Or Haganuz. According to the Yerushalmi Brachas, how long did that light last? Nope. Could even say that aloud. How many hours? The Medrash says, according to the Yerushalmi says, the first 12 hours plus the next 24 of Shabbos. It wasn't until the end of Shabbos that the Or disappeared and it got dark, and Adam Harishon freaked out, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him how to make artificial light. That's why we have Havdalah. Right? But the first light, that Or Haganuz, lasted for 36 hours. How many candles are there? How many lights are there in the course of Hanukkah? 36. 36. We have 1 candle for every hour that Or Haganuz shone. The Malbim in Eretz Chemda points out that the first day does not say Vayehi Chen. You can't say, and it was so, because the fixture of the first day was that Or, and that Or didn't last. So you can't say Vayehi Chen. Where does Vayehi Chen return? In Bamidbar, Vayas Kain Aharon. Vayas Kain Aaron. Aaron restored through the menorah some of this ha'ora, this illumination from above that was part of the Or HaGanuz. And this continues past the days of the Beis HaMikdash with Chanuakah. Let's talk a little bit more about what this light is all about. The next section is compliments of Rav Goldvicht, the Talmud of Chazon Ish, and then the Rosh Hashiva, who started the yeshiva of Kerem B'Yavne and stayed in the yeshiva for the rest of his life. We have a machlokas, dispute about how you light Neiros Chanukah. Do you add every day, like we do, like Hillel, or are you poches v'holech? Do you start with 8, like Beis Shammai, and then 7, 6, 5, 4, 3 until you get to down to 1 on the last day? What is this machlokas about? Rav Goldvicht postulates, speculates that it may be related to another machlokas Hillel and Shammai in brachas and Daf Nun Beis Amud Beis. What's the bracha that you make for Havdalah when you make the bracha on the light? What do we do? Borei Ma'orei Ha'esh. What does Beis Shammai say? Borei Ma'or Ha'esh. Ma'or is singular, and Ma'orei is plural. According to Beis Shammai, you make a bracha on one kind of light, one wavelength, supposedly, and according to Beis Shammai, you make it on the totality, all of the different shades of the prism. What's this machloket about? What is this about? It's not about which light is more important, whether you make it on how many angstroms the wavelength is supposed to be of a particular or that Adam used. The Gra said there's no machloket in Metzius about what light is. The machloket is which does the bracha mark. The source of all light, which is one, the concept of light, ma'or ha'esh, the fact that there's such a thing as illumination of light, or the practical consequences, ma'orei. Within that light, there are many, many different kinds of light, many different shades of hues in that spectrum. Do we look at the source, or do we look at its practical development? This is consistent with Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel in general, that Beis Shammai often goes for the principle, for the source, and Beis Hillel goes for the practical consequences. You can show other examples of that. We don't have time right now. Now, we'll flesh this out a little bit. The old light, our old light, the light that we're used to, the old light, meaning the Or HaGanuz, allowed Adam HaRishon and man to see everything, as I said, for what it is, without any disruption, without any resistance, even at a distance. The new light that replaced the Or HaGanuz, the one that Adam HaRishon was introduced to, Motzei Shabbat, and that we celebrate every week, with Havdalah, that light has to be worked at. It's not there for the asking. You have to do something. How did Adam HaRishon get that first light? Motzei Shabbos? HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have had a lightning bolt come from Shemayim. He does that in other places. And he would have had a little campfire. But Adam HaRishon didn't go that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't go that route. What happened? HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him the Chachma, and he had to sit there like a Boy Scout, taking 2 flintstones, rubbing them together. He had to produce the light from what was already there. Okay? We're getting closer. Let me ask you a question. We do this all the time. It confuses people. In the Mishkan, you know the main kelim, the main utensils in the kelim, in the Mishkan. What do they symbolize? Start off easy. What is the Shulchan? What does that symbolize? Panasa, it's bread, right? Sustenance. Okay? What about the Aron? What does the Aron symbolize? Torah. Yeah. Now, what does the menorah symbolize? So people say, illumination, light. Do we need illumination and light from anything else other than the Aron? So you said, what's the difference?
Torah Shabbat.
Torah shebichtav and Torah shebal peh. The luchot are in the aron. They sit there. They're encased in a shell. You don't do anything to them. They're there. They do what they do just by being. What do you have to do every day to the menorah? You have to put in fresh oil. You have to light it. You have the steps going up to it, because unless you come up close to it, you don't get anything out. In the second source of illumination in the Mishkan, all you get out of it is what you put into it. That's Torah Sheba'al Peh. It only comes through effort. There's something there, its potential is hidden away, and it only comes through effort. Adam Arishon, Motzai Shabbos, had to create a new kind of light. He had to do it by rubbing things together because it had to be his avodah. Says the Sefer Habahir, where did the Or HaGonos go? It went into Torah Sheba'al Peh. Not saying that we have the totality of it, but some of that Or HaGonos, the special light that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, so that we should be able to see the world with perfect clarity. Where is that Or today? It's not where Liv Yosin is, waiting in Shemayim, waiting for the moment to come. It's here. It's in Torah Sheba'al Peh. By the way, 36. So we've said that it's the number of hours that the organism was around, and it's the number of candles. How many Masechtas do you think there are in Shas? 36. So there you have it again. The Torah Sheba'al Peh is not so clear. Torah Shebichtav is what they used to call in computers WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. Everything is clear, it's open. The first luchot, which were Torah Shebichtav, everything in Torah Sheba'al Peh was there between the lines. It was all there on the luchot. Today, Torah Sheba'al Peh, you can make mistakes. You can say a right pshat, a wrong pshat. You can find 5 different pshatim that all seem to be equally attractive. It's confusing sometimes, and every person has to approach it in the same way. To take it even further. So we're here marking a Chanuakah, which commemorates a Chanukat Habayit, right? Because they came back. The temple had been, the Beit HaMikdash had been vandalized and desecrated by the Syrian Greeks. It took them a while to get the cleanup crew in, to make new kelim. Finally, they're ready to be mechanech a new bayit. Right? So that's the Chanuakah that we talk about. So I find this a little strange. So does Rav Hutner. I have gone to parties before. When people have bought a new house, even moved into a new apartment, you have a housewarming. It's a new house. I have never been invited to anyone for a simcha when they put on a new roof because the old one leaked. There's no new Beis HaMikdash. There's an old Beis HaMikdash. What kind of Chanuakah is there? You're just getting the thing back to where it was before. Patching up the holes, taking care of some of the halachot that were important. This is a new bayit? What are we talking about? Rabbi said there's a piece, if you're going to do one piece of machshava on Chanuakah, which I'm not going to develop right now, it's Pachad Yitzchok Maimer Yud. Unbelievable piece. You have to see this piece. The basic thesis of the piece is, borrowed of course from the Maral, that Klal Yisrael, Avoda, and the place of the Avoda have a common destiny, a common path, a common go-road. Rav Hutner shows how each Mishkan, starting from the one in the Midbar, and Shiloh, and Nov, and Bayis Shlomo, and Bayis Sheni, each one represented a different tekufa, a different epoch, a different period in the way we related to Torah, how much Torah we got, how Torah was learned, and each one had a different kind of avoda, a different way of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and needed a different bayit or a semi-bayit. And he shows each one, you can make a chart. He shows Nevuah is one, and Zekanim is one. Each one had a different way of understanding HaKadosh Baruch Hu because he had different tools. Now we're getting a little closer. What marked the Torah of the second Beit HaMikdash up until the time that the Yavanim moved in and desecrated it? What's the feature that we remember from Pirkei Avot? This is Anshe Knesset Havdolah. It's the end of Nevuah. You still had Chagai, Zechai, and Malachai, but they petered out. Now you have a special group that really began some fundamental systematizing of Torah Sheba'al Peh. That Beit HaMikdash is done. Now they're mechanech a new bayit. There would be a third, close to the end of Hurdus, but that doesn't count. His complete enlargement of the whole temple plaza and the enlargement of the Beit HaMikdash, that doesn't count as a separate bayit. The bayit right after Chanukah does. What happened there? What happened there? Rav Hutner says, if you want to get Chanukah down to a single phrase of less than 10 words, less than 5 words, 3 words to be exact, what would the words be? Ner became or. Ner became or. The Neirot of Chanukah burnt beyond their capacity. What's a ner? Ner doesn't mean candle. It means a lamp. Every lamp has a certain height, a certain width, a certain diameter. It has a capacity of oil. The wick has certain properties. If you know all the properties, you can compute, you can calculate how long the light is going to last. The idea of Chanukah was that the finite ner became infinite or, became something far beyond the capacity of that ner. Translate that into Torah and the avoda of the second half of Bayit Sheni, and what is it? What happened during this time? What happened in the last 200 years of Bayit Sheni? These last 200 years before the Romans destroyed it. What happened in that time? This was the time that you had the flowering of Torah Sheba'al Peh, where it was done not primarily by a special group with other people, enjoying a little bit. This was the time in which Torah Sheba'al Peh became the property of the entire nation, in which everybody got a share in it, where everybody was encouraged to learn, sometimes in a systematized manner, because Mishnayot was starting to be written down and passed along. It would take another 400 years before they were published. But this is when the Yesod HaMishnah was written. This is where Chazal developed for us a system of learning that what would happen with that system of learning of this 200 years? It would pave the way for Galut of the next thousands of years. In these 200 years, Torah was developed in a way that after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, we are still nurtured from it today, and will be so until Mashiach comes. The Ner of Torah. And that's what it was at the time. That Ner became Or. It became disembodied Or. It became illumination, which doesn't know any physical attributes or capacities. It became Or itself, because that's what Torah Sheba'al Peh was. And that's why it is a second bayit. Because each bayit, each Mishkan and bayit introduces another Tekufah, and that's what happened over here. Bayit Sheni 2.0, I guess we would call it today, Bayit Sheni 2.0 ushered in a new Tekufah, the flowering of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Back to Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. I think Hurdus's Bayit would be 2.5. The first one is 1.0, this is 2.0, and then Hurdus is 2.5. Okay, or 2.1, whatever you want to call it. Just to wrap it up with Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai.
Doing it, 2.5 means...
It really should be 2.1 the way we do
No,
it.
what does that mean? Since we have half to the third temple?
It's
Gamidosh?
right. In the middle of the version 2, there was one little upgrade along the way.
For the third, the Gamidosh.
The third, we're waiting for. That'll be 3.0. And the 3.0 is not going to be followed by 3.1 because according to Chazal, 3.0 is it. So no further. It's like when they promised Windows 7 would be the last, Windows 8 would be the last. You never believed it. 3.0 on the Beit HaMikdash is going to be the last. That we can trust the Baruch Hu for that. Finishing off with Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai says that the Borei Ma'or Ha'esh, the source of all illumination. What is that source? Says Ugolvech. Beit Shammai's Ma'or Ha'esh means the Or HaGanuz. That's the source of all illumination. Everything that we have is a fraction of it, is a downgrade of the original. Beit Shammai counts down because what are we looking forward to? We're looking forward to when we can get back to that Ma'or Ha'esh, to that primal Or, the Or HaGanuz. Beit Hillel, as usual, is into the practical, the here and now. Halacha, Atid Lavo is going to be like Shammai, the Arizal says. But for the moment, it's like Hillel. He's the practical one. Mm-hmm. What does Beit Hillel say we do with Or? We celebrate getting more and more light. 1 the first night, 2 the second night, 3 the third night, finding new ways of extracting beauty, new chidushim from Torah. That's Beit Hillel. Okay, we move to a completely different arena. This is my all-time favorite. I am so happy you invited me because a Chanukah without doing this piece for me is just not a Chanukah.
Can I ask a question on previous? First of all, Or Chadash 36 hours. Or Chadash was beyond Rishon.
Right.
Where?
Well, the Or Chadash means that there'll be a restoration of that first Or. For us, it'll be Chadash for the last.
Yeah, I understand, but 36 hours, where Rabbi gets 30, it was beyond Rishon.
The first 12 hours after Adam was created,
but it was created
plus Shabbat.
It was
24
created in the
Shabbat.
first day, no?
Right.
Yeah. It was created, but nobody could use it. Who's gonna use it? It wasn't until Adam HaRishon got around.
So where is the 12 hours comes from? It's from the time Adam HaRishon was the 10th hours of the day. Where is 12 comes from?
Where's 12 come from? Next. Just remember, this is not my own. This is the Bahir. I assume you know more about the Bahir than I do. Okay. Next. My favorite all-around piece. We start off with a couple of psukim from Sefer Daniel. Sefer Daniel. I will translate. It sounds, I have to tell you, the Californians, it sounds like Daniel was on a bad acid trip. Daniel says, I saw in a vision of the night, behold, 4 heavenly spirits stirred up the great ocean. And 4 beasts arose from the sea, each one different from the other. The first one was a griffin, a lion with wings. Right? We call that a griffin. It had wings like an eagle. And I saw it pluck out its wings or pluck something from its wings, and it lifted off from the ground, and it stood on its feet like a man, and it had the heart of man. Next, I saw a different beast. This one looked like a bear, and it leaned on its side, and 3 ribs of meat were dangling from its teeth. And they told this bear, "Lazy bear, get up and eat some more." After that, I saw a leopard, and it had 4 wings with which it flew, and 4 heads, and it was given dominion. After this, I had a different dream. So it's 3 dreams in one night, and another dream either on a different night or in a different part of the night. Separate dream. In this dream, we saw something that was more awesome and fearful than any of the other beasts. It had teeth of steel, and it ate, and it crumbled. And whatever it wasn't interested in eating or crumbling, it trampled, stepped on. And it was different from all the other beasts, and it had 10 horns. What's this all about, Balsai? No? What is it? What is it? It's a badass? What is it? What?
The 4 Malchuyos.
The 4 Malchiot. The 4 oppressor kingdoms that would rise up against Klal Yisrael. Maral, you have to see inside. It's not only a beautiful piece, but it's just so important hashkafically in dealing with the issue of evil itself, in theodicy, the nature of evil, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's relation to evil. Maral says that there's evil in the world is an imperfect place, there will be evil, and the worst mistake that you could make, one that the church made, is that somehow evil is a result of forces that are opposed to God, and they do what they want, and God could stop them, but He doesn't. That's not what it's about. Evil is something that was anticipated from the very first moment of creation. Where is the first reference in Torah to the Arba Malchiyot? It's not Sefer Daniel. Where's the first reference? There you go. First psukim of the Torah. Man hasn't even been created. The Medrash says, "V'ha'aretz hayta tohu vohu choshech al pnei tahom." 4 somber images and figures. 4 figures. 4 dark images. What comes right after that? V'ruach Elokim merachefet al pnei hamayim. In other places, I try to schmaltz this up and try imagining that you're a Hollywood score writer. If you were setting that first phrase to music, what instruments would you use? Tohu, vohu, choshech al pnei tahom. You're talking about double bass and kettle drums and contrabassoon, and then ruach Elokim merachefet al pnei hamayim. That's a piccolo. All the way at the other end of the register. It's light and it's eerie. What's that Ruach Elokim merachefet al pnei hamayim going to the Medrash? Mashiach. Rucho shel Mashiach. Ribbono de'alma kula, what are we doing here? Man hasn't been created. Evil hasn't been created. Nothing's been created. The continents aren't here. And already we're talking about 4 Malchiot and Ruach shel Mashiach. Says the Maral, what Chazal are getting at is that the entire progress of the world, including the bad stuff, the exact roadmap for the way things would have to play out, was foreseen by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, prescribed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the antidote to all of that was built into the fabric of creation from the very first day. It has to be that way because things of such import, says the Maral, cannot be random or accidental. That's the Yesod. You have to see with your own eyes and you have to think about what it means. The things that do have some leeway, but the things that really make the difference in the progress of the world cannot be accidental. That has to be subject to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hashgacha and planned for and mapped out in advance. We're only starting. What is the nature of these Arba Malchiyot? What are they about? Says the Maral, this is the Yesod. Man, with a capital M, has to be confronted by evil. And man has to look it straight in the eye and rise above it. Not one time, but over long, long periods of time. And the end comes when man successfully weathers all the different kinds of attack that evil can pose and emerges triumphant. Says the Maral, the Arba Malchiyot are nothing more than the three parts of man. The three parts of man, each coming up close against a particular kind of evil. Each part of man is challenged by a society that stands for the degradation of that part of man, and Klal Yisrael has to rise above it. Now, Maral, I'll tell you, is not consistent. Sometimes he divides up the human personality into two parts, sometimes three parts, sometimes four parts, sometimes even five parts. I don't have it all worked out. I don't know of anybody who ever wrote on it, but it actually doesn't have to be consistent because it really should depend on the context of the medrash. In this case, Maral says that we're going to deal essentially with three parts of man. The fourth is all of them acting in concert together. The idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. What three parts of man would you surmise that he would talk about? Two of them are very easy.
What's the question?
Mind,
What? Okay, mind,
heart,
body, and what's the third?
The bottom part?
No, that's not an essential part of man. That's just a kli.
So,
I'll give you a hint. So we have two parts. We have the seichel, we have the mind. He doesn't call it neshama. He never does. We have the seichel, we have the guf, the body, and the third part, only women get, and men never get. You want to try it?
Bina? Is the heart?
The heart, emotions. Right? Men never get it because our wives tell us all the time that we don't have it or we're not in touch with it. What else is there? But Maral's wife probably clued him in on this. Nefesh. And he calls that nefesh. So let's look at these Arba Malchiot and the four beasts that Daniel saw. Which was the first one that confronted Klal Yisrael, that drove us into Galut? First Galut was at the hands of Bavel. Okay, so Bavel destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. What kind of a challenge was that for us? Physical, intellectual, or emotional? Think hard. Did we have a problem ideologically when they destroyed the Beit HaMikdash? Physically? But emotionally, that's something else. If you try to encapsulate for yourself of all the things that you can point to that having Hashra'at Shechina in our midst would do, having a place where if you prepare yourself the right way, you feel the presence of the Ribono Shel Olam. How many people do you know who've gone their whole life trying to feel that for 1 second? And when you had a Beit HaMikdash and you wanted to feel a little bit of uplift, all you had to do was go there, maybe bring the right korban, do a little bit of hachana, which the Kohen helped you, and you soared. You soared. That's like the lion taking with wings. With wings. You soared. The purpose of the emotional apparatus in the morale is to take things that you want to do or that you know and animate them. It's the engine that enables you, that gives you passion and power. Not only did the Bavliim destroy the Beit HaMikdash, the source of our emotional nourishment, what did they replace it with? And please don't spell out the details. But if you know, just from the Ramazim in Chazal, and certainly what we know from history, the things that they were into are things you still could not show on television, even in the United States in the year 2013. They were into emotion, all right, but they got it from a very, very different place. It was an emotional charge that you got from Tuma, not from Kedusha. So that was the confrontation with Bava. Next on the list, Parasumada. Parasumada. What were the Persians into back then? Parties. The first party animal was Achashverosh. The word Mishta is used more times in Megillat Esther than all the books of Tanakh put together. They're into partying. Everything happens at a party. They're eating, they're drinking, they kill people at parties, they celebrate at parties. At the end of a party, they have another party. Everything's parties. That's the big bear, the corpulent bear, who's so fat that he can't even get up. They got to push him. There's more food. Get up. They're bringing out the Viennese table. That's Parasumadai. Now it gets interesting. Who's after that? This is the easiest one. Yavan. Yavan. By the way, we always mistranslate it, don't we? If you walk into many shuls around and you say the Greeks, they'll look at you like you're a primitive. We know it's not the Greeks. It wasn't the Greeks. Who was it?
Rome.
No. The Syrians. Why they called Syrian Greeks? Because Ptolemy's kingdom got divided up between the northern heirs to Alexander and the southern. So you had the Syrian Greeks from the north, and you had Ptolemy, whatever number was in the south. But these were Syrian Greeks. Why do we blame it on the Greeks? Seder of Soloveitchik, Zichronu Livracha. No, it's not a mistake. It's not like Chazal didn't know history. Chazal are interested in the Shoresh. What was the makor of the challenge of this nation? It was Greek culture. It didn't matter whether the guy came from Damascus or he came from Thessalopolis. It didn't matter. The culture was a Greek culture. It was their shita. That's what we're up against. What was the challenge here? Challenge here was intellectual. Kisvu lachem al keren ashor, ein lachem chelek v'elokei Yisrael. They were into Chachma, and as Maral says elsewhere, to undo Chachma, you need to undo our Chachma. You got to be a different Chachma. There had to be something that at least was a competitor. But they didn't want competitors. They didn't want competitors. So we had this ideological battle with Yavin. End of the first three. Why is the fourth beast in a separate dream? Because think of who the number 4 was. The Romans. Right? The Romans. The Romans have their own culture? Nah. The Romans were more fearsome than anybody else. If they weren't interested in just imposing a different ideological order, they had no regard for anything else. Nothing else counted, no human life, nothing. What they weren't interested in taking and plundering, they would just destroy. They were there to assert their power. Nothing else counted. That's why they were more fearsome. The 10 horns that the Namaral, I don't think goes into it, I don't remember, but the Rishonim say the 10 horns are different civilizations that grew up as an outgrowth. I don't know how you handle it in Ashkenazic circles. Muhammad is considered one of the 10 horns. I can understand that in some Sephardic circles they replaced Rome with Muhammad. I haven't seen too much of that. But why does he get 10 horns? Because from the time the Romans took over, that's been Western civilization, increasingly Eastern civilization as well. Western civilization took over the world. Took a couple of thousand years, but it took over the world. And you think we're finished? We're just starting. Rav Bullman, Zichrono Livracha, pointed out that not only did the Romans act in such a brazen, oppressive manner, but they recapitulated all of the damage done by their 3 predecessors in order. What was the first thing that the Romans did? Destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, like Bavel did. What was the next thing that they did? For close to 2,000 years, bodily persecution. Bodily persecution. They herded us into ghettos, they had pogroms, they burnt us at the stake. They kept us poor and deprived. And finally, with the enlightenment of the Western world, and the decline of the church and the like, you get into the final Tekufa, which is, you're religious? What do you have, an IQ of 23? Intelligent people have no need for God. As I think it was Laplace, who told Napoleon when he gave him a copy of his encyclopedia. Back then an encyclopedia meant a compendium of all human knowledge. And Napoleon was an avid reader. Napoleon went through the work. I don't know, I can't tell you if he read it page to page, but he went back to Laplace and he said, "Sir, I have only one question. Went through all 20 volumes of this thing. There is no mention of God anywhere." And Laplace said to him, "Your Excellency, I have no need for such a hypothesis." Right? That's where we are today, where the challenge is ideological. It's the seichel. It's to the way we think. Right? We're just starting with us. I said that there are 4 parts, right? The mind, the body, the nefesh, the emotional apparatus, and the combination of all of them. Let's think of the Hebrew words. Let's think of the Hebrew words for them. What are the Hebrew words? Guf, Gimel, Seichel, Shin, Nefesh, the emotions, and altogether Hakol, Goshna. V'es Yehuda Sholach Lefonov Goshna. Ma'aseh Avot Siman Lebanim. What happened in Bereshit, it's happening next week's Parsha. Adumbrates the rest of history. The name Yehuda, to the Hoda'ah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, acknowledging HaKadosh Baruch Hu, would be sent out to 4 Geluyot that would challenge Guf, Seichel, Nefesh, and Hakol. That's the course of Jewish history. By the way, in Gematria, Goshna equals Mashiach. Goshna equals Mashiach. And Goshna equals one other thing.
The 4 letters of the dreidel.
The 4, at least in Chutz La'aretz, it's the 4 sides of the dreidel. The 4 sides of the dreidel. Says the Bnei Yissaschar. The dreidel is Jewish history. Because people think that events happen randomly. You spin it. Now it falls on this side, then it falls on that side. No side gets too much. You can get a streak of one, but eventually it turns into something else. It's all random. It's all random. But what's the real story of the dreidel? That all of history really revolves around one point. That's the idea. Everything is spinning around one point. That point is the fortunes of Klal Yisrael, and it is directed by a hand from above. That's the dreidel. So this last part was the Bnei Yissaschar, the Din of a Rebbe, who builds on the entire introduction from the Maral. there is a slightly different way of looking at Galut. I think you could see it as a companion piece. It's in the third Chelek, starting on page 207. If Dessler sees the progression of Galut, he doesn't talk about the Arba Malchiyot per se, but he talks about the progression of Galut as a tikkun of the Chet of Adam Harishon. Adam blew it. After that, there was an opportunity for 10 dorot of individuals to rectify the damage, to undo the mistakes of Adam Harishon. Didn't happen. After Noah, another 10 dorot, didn't happen. Finally, at the end of that time, pay dirt, Avram Avinu. He's the first one who steps into the process of beginning to do the tikkun of the chet. From Avram, you have a weeding out of Yishmael, a weeding out of Esav. You finally get to Yaakov. With Yaakov, what do you get? You go from the individual to a small group, to the family. Mitato shlema, 10, 12 shvatim. By the end of his lifetime, they're all shleimim, they're all reconciled, they're all together, they're all saying Kriya Shema together. So you go to a small group. By the time they get to Mitzrayim, there's 70 nefashot. Now you're not talking about a small group anymore, but a small nation. A small nation. Aral said if they would have been any less than that, they would have been swallowed up by the Mitzrayim. If they'd been more than that, the Mitzrayim would not have had shlitan on them. It had to be the minimum number to be a small nation. By the time they leave, Shishim Ribu, all the Shrashei Neshama of Klal Yisrael. Now the process of Tikkun can begin in earnest. Why? Why couldn't Abraham do it and Yitzchok do it and Yaakov do it? Because Adam Harishon was bigger in a sense. He was kolel all the nefashot that ever would be. So the Tikkun had to come from a mass process, not from enlightened individuals. So they started the process of Tikkun with receiving the Torah, then it went downhill. Cheder ego, other chatoyim. By the time you get to what we'll call Bayit 1.0, Binyan Shlomo. By the end of that Tekufa, things aren't looking so well. Klal Yisrael violated the three Averot Chamurot, right? Gilui Arayot, Shfichot Damim, Avodah Zarah, idolatry, and immorality, and murder. There was one shorish to all of that, says Rav Dessler. What was the shorish? One word that could account for all of it. Ta'ava. Klal Yisrael said, they were into Avodah Zarah. Why were they into Avodah Zarah? That was the Avodah Zarah. It was only to be matter for them, the Arayot. They were into Ta'ava. Certainly the murder was was part of that. At least that's the way he sees it. Bayit Sheni, or Bayit 2.0, came to a crash with Yavan. What did Yavan introduce? Not Ta'ava, but Ga'ava. The idea that we know it all, we have no use for any other culture or any other knowledge. We're numero uno. By the end of Bayit Sheni, by Bayit 2.1 in our categorization before, Ga'ava moves up. What is super Ga'ava? Chutzpah. The Hellenists at least had something to be prideful about. They did put together an incredible civilization. Vayafta Elokim leyefet. You can write a Sefer Torah in only one other language. What about Rome? They stole. Their culture was just a continuation of what they took from others. And when they didn't have anything to offer, they imposed it upon people anyway. What's the final stage, says Rav Dessler? Ikveta de Mashiach. How do you move up from Ga'ava square, from super Ga'ava, says Rabbi Dessler, at the end of time, you have chutzpah of Rome that's being dished out by other Yidden, by other Jews. Rabbi Dessler says this is the Kufa that we're now, and he wrote this over 50 years ago, 60 years ago actually. HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows us to come back into the land. We have a certain amount of Jewish sovereignty. And who tries to run the show? People who can say, we have no, not all of them, chas v'sholom, but some of them, and some of the architects, we have no need for such a hypothesis. But we're Jews with no such hypothesis. There are no nisim, it's only kochi v'yotzem yadi. Try to stamp out religion. The chutzpah of Jews themselves. This is what he says is that the meaning of the Mishnah in Sota, the ikvita, the Mashiach, chutzpah yaski. Let me close and just sum up a little bit. Hellenism, the thing that we're commemorating the struggle against right now, whether it's the morals or if Vestas and not too far apart, how is that faring today? Well, better than most of us think. The obvious one, and that's usually when we stop thinking, is that look at the people who are prominent in society, sports figures, celebrities, people with no tochen, but the Greeks were the real Greeks, the Hellenists were into the body, athletics as a demonstration of the chachma of the gods, right? So we're still into that. In California, the two cardinal averot are not idolatry and gili arayot. They may become mitzvahs. What are the two cardinal averot in California? Smoking and not going to the gym. Right? You damage your body. So in that sense, Hellenism is very much alive. But it goes a lot further than that. Rav Goldwicht in another piece says, I think I mentioned this before, Kitvu lachem al keren hashor, ein lachem chelek Elokei Yisrael. Did they believe in Elokei Yisrael or not believe in Elokei Yisrael? That line sounds like, we're prepared to believe in God. We're prepared to believe in your God. You want to teach us about your God? We'll even learn. But, ein lanu chelek Elokei Yisrael. Lanu. That knowledge is not something that's going to legislate what I have to do. It's not going to direct action. I can know and I can contemplate and I can philosophize, but don't tell me what to do. There I retain autonomy. Rav Yaakov Galinsky Shlita told a story. I have a feeling it's not original to him. Many other people have told the same story. He says he once heard a lecture by a professor for the war about the ills of smoking. All the reasons why people shouldn't smoke. And throughout the lecture, the professor was puffing away. So somebody went over to him, man asked him, I understand, he spent 3 hours talking about the ills of smoking, and said he's sitting there with a cigarette or a cigar or a pipe. So he looked at him and he said, and if I were a trigonometry professor, would I have to become a triangle? Right? The distance between the theoretical and translating that into a course of action that is binding and normative and something that people feel that they have to follow. What Torah Hashem does for us, it has the rules and then tells us how to act. That is the opposite of Hellenism. The idea of refusing to allow for not only a different chachma, but the morals way of putting it. That what the Yevanim really couldn't understand, really rejected, was the idea that there was a transcendent chachma. A chachma, not that came from another group, that's still human. But that a chachma that came from a higher source, from God, rather than from human intellect, that's what they found so disquieting about Torah. Is that alive today? Christopher Hitchens, one of the world's greatest atheists, went crazy a little bit when he found out he was really halachically Jewish. He only found out B'Sov Yomov. Okay, now he died about a year ago. Right? 6 years ago, Christopher Hitchens wrote a piece and he said, Chanuakah should not be celebrated. Chanuakah was the greatest tragedy for all of mankind. I kid you not, I'm not exaggerating. Hanukkah was the single greatest tragedy in the history of mankind. Why? Because you had a clash between Hellenic rationalism, the way it should be, and a small band of religious fanatics. Think of what would have happened had those fanatics been defeated. It would have been the end of the Jews. If it would have been the end of the Jews, there would never be any Christians. Can you think of how great a world it would be without any Jews and without any Christians? Not the Jews, nothing against the people, but no Judaism, no Christianity. Wonderful. Olam haba. Just the world of rationalists and atheists. Hanukkah was the cause of all of our misery. If the Jews wouldn't have survived, the Christians never would have been born. Matthew Arnold, this will be the last line. It's always one of my favorites. He was a British critic into the 19th century. He was a champion of Hellenism, modern Hellenism. He said he had great admiration for the Jews. And he wrote, I think, one of the greatest lines about Hanukkah. Still, despite that line, he opted for the other side. Okay, mistake. But his line is something that's worthwhile saying, and it's a great summation of what we should take out of Hanukkah. He said, the Greeks found the holiness of beauty, but Klal Yisrael found the beauty of holiness. Freilich and Lichtenton, Hanukkah.
No,